Here it is, in all its glory, the RX480 made it to my house for Christmas. Was it worthwhile upgrade from a GTX750? Let's find out. Hi Max, happy Christmas from Not Tech Drama. I made my mind on the RX480 as explained in the video I will link up here below. Because of the new monitor I bought, the LG 27UD58, which is coming with FreeSync. So the RX480 seems even a better option for me given FreeSync was available on my monitor. I ended up buying the Sapphire Nitro Plus OC overclock out of the factory, the 4GB version. I did not went for the 8GB one because I was confident enough the gain in performance compared to the 750 will be already substantial with a 4GB model, and so I spent only £204 or €250 in Amazon to have the card delivered nicely just before Christmas. The card is very well built with a nice backplate which includes a switch for the LED, a little superfluous given you can control it from the Sapphire Trick software, and a VBIOS switch, which I'm not really sure which way should be turned to enable the overclocked performances. The included information in the box are minimal, and I had to get on Reddit to find out by default is set on the performance mode. And I confirmed that as well by checking the clock on the GPU being at 1306 MHz, but it would have been nicer from Sapphire to be a little bit more clear with this information. I was a little worried as well with a 6-pin connector being on the back of the card, given my Bitfenix Phenom case is little tight and my cable management not the greatest. But everything fitted nicely with plenty of room. The card has a nice RGB LED which is not overdone and will look nice if you happen to have a case with a window. Enough talking about how it looks. Let's try to talk a little bit more about how it performed. I've tested the card with several benchmarks and gameplay at 1080p, 1440 and even 4K where possible depending on the game. You will find the benchmark at the end of the video, so you're welcome to watch them if you really get interested in to see the actual numbers. It was actually painful not to enjoy the card, but just go through the benchmark for you, and I did it just because I'm very good. Now, let's wrap up before going into the benchmark so you can see them just if you like to. The RX480 is a phenomenal upgrade for 1080p gaming compared to the 750 and is also allowing you to play with certain game at 1440 without compromise too much on the quality. And 4K, well, is doable if you go into the low side of the settings or if you use it with not so new games such as for example Borderlands 2. I was a little bit worried about the quality of the drivers and the overall bundle software from AMD coming from Nvidia, but I must say that AMD do a pretty good job with drivers and software, and honestly I happen to like more the AMD software than the Nvidia one. Lastly, temperature. JC2Sense was going adamant on the gigabyte version of the RX480, which was going way over the 75 degrees on load. Now, the RX480 is not running really cool. It's running at actually 75 degrees when under 100% of load. However, bear in mind the fans were running only at 40% of their capacity. So I wouldn't be overly worried about the fact that the card is reaching 75 degrees Celsius when under load, given the fans were only at 40% and the temperature was staying constant. And most importantly, was not throttling at all. The clock was nicely stable at 1306 MHz as per specifications, so no complaints there for my Sapphire Nitro Plus. Yes, in comparison to my GTX750 is running much hotter, as the GTX750 as tested in this video up here was actually running at only 45.5 degrees under load. But as you can see as well then next from the benchmarks, the difference in performance of the two cards I think well justify the fact that yeah, it's running hotter. But again, I won't be absolutely worried about that. Just be sure that you have a good airflow, especially if you run in a case which is not, you know, a huge case. In my case, the Bitfenix Phenom, maybe a little bit challenged, but if you have a good airflow, you just expel all the hot air and you ensure that the other components are not actually affected by the increasing temperature of the GPU. Subscribe for more of this content, and if you still want to stay with me, just go ahead and keep watching the benchmarks. Let's have a quick roll on the benchmarks. Bioshock Infinite at 1080p high settings had an average of 48 FPS on the GTX and 134 on the RX480. Wow. At 1440p, 38 frames per second on the GTX and 88.8 on the RX480, still on high settings, so quite playable on 1440p on the RX480. Metroless light at 1080p, 33.6 FPS on the GTX and 105.6 on the RX, stunning. At 1440p, the GTX was at 39.33 and the RX still rocking nicely at 88.3. At 4K in low settings, the GTX dropped to an absolutely unplayable 13.6 FPS, while the RX was delivering at 61.6 FPS. Let's try some older game like Borderlands, locked at 72 FPS with no VSync. I was playing at 1440p on high on the GTX at 40 FPS, while on the RX it's flying at 70 FPS. With older games, 4K is actually possible, with the RX pushing at 48 FPS, which are really smooth thanks to FreeSync. The latest game is Fallout 4, which was really struggling with the GTX and promised to upgrade to the RX. At 1080p Ultra, the GTX was already not adequate with 29 FPS, while the RX was going at 132 FPS. At 1440p, I went on medium on the GTX and got a decent 32 FPS, but the RX on Ultra got 88 FPS. Amazing. What about 4K? Well, did not even try that with the GTX for Fallout. The RX was at 30.8 at Ultra, not really playable, and 53 FPS on low, which is playable, but of course is low settings. So consider that I tested Fallout 4 only in the very early part while still being confined in the house, so more likely frames will drop when in open space with enemies and action going on. But still quite impressive that it can manage 53 FPS on low in 4K. I hope these series of benchmarks were useful to you, and let me know in the comment if you were brave enough to watch till the end of the video. Happy Christmas!